feels perfectly balanced because it is the only world we have ever known. Its gravity is strong enough to hold oceans, air, mountains, forests, cities, and human bodies against the surface. But it is not so strong that walking becomes impossible. Trees collapse under their own weight, or rockets can never escape. Every living thing on this planet evolved under that pull. Now imagine Earth suddenly becomes twice as massive. The planet does not simply look a little bigger. The change reaches into everything. Your body becomes heavier. Buildings experience stresses they were never designed to handle. The atmosphere presses harder against the ground. The oceans deepen under stronger pressure. Volcanoes and earthquakes become more violent as the interior adjusts to the new weight. And above us, the moon, satellites, and space stations are suddenly orbiting a planet whose gravity has changed beneath them. Earth would still be Earth for a moment. Then the entire planet would begin reacting to the fact it had become a super Earth overnight. What doubling Earth's mass means. Mass is not the same as size. If Earth became twice as massive while keeping roughly the same radius, gravity at the surface would become almost twice as strong. A person who weighs 70 kilograms on Earth would feel as if they weighed 140 kilograms. If Earth became twice as massive, in a more realistic way, its radius would probably increase somewhat because extra rock and metal would add volume. In that case, the surface gravity would still rise, but not perfectly double because the surface would be farther from the planet's center. For this disaster scenario, imagine the most dramatic version. Earth suddenly gains extra mass while remaining close to its present size. That means gravity increases sharply. Everything resting on the surface becomes heavier at once, not because the objects themselves change, but because Earth now pulls on them with much more force. For humans, that first moment would feel like the whole world pressing down. Standing would become difficult. Running would become exhausting. Falling would become more dangerous. Every step would cost more energy because your muscles would be fighting a stronger planet. And unlike a heavy backpack, this weight could not be removed. The human body under double gravity. The human body is built for one Earth gravity. Our bones, muscles, joints, heart, and lungs all developed under this familiar pull. In double gravity, every moment becomes harder. A person lying down might survive at first, but standing would place enormous strain on the legs, spine, and circulatory system. The heart would need to work much harder to push blood upward to the brain. Some people might faint simply from trying to stand. Walking would feel like carrying another version of your body on your shoulders. Stairs would become dangerous. Running would be almost impossible for many people. Injuries would increase because falls would hit harder and bones would carry far greater stress. Children, the elderly, and people with medical conditions would especially be vulnerable. Even breathing could feel different. The chest muscles would work against greater weight, while the atmosphere itself would press more heavily on the body. Humanity would not instantly go extinct. People could survive in controlled environments, especially lying down or using support systems, but the world would no longer be built for us. Cities begin to fail. Modern cities are designed for Earth's current gravity. Buildings, bridges, cranes, towers, roads, and tunnels all depend on calculations involving weight. If gravity suddenly doubled, every structure would effectively become twice as heavy. Some buildings might survive because engineers include safety margins, but many older, weaker, or heavier loaded structures would fail. Roofs could collapse. Bridges could crack. Tall buildings would experience dangerous stresses. Elevators, cables, and foundations would be pushed far beyond their intended limits. Power lines would sag, trees would break, hillsides could give way as soil and rock experienced stronger downward force. Dams would face greater pressure from water behind them, while underground tunnels would experience increased stress from the material above. Vehicles would also struggle. Cars would press harder into the road, increasing friction and damaging suspension systems. Aircraft would face a serious problem as their weight would double while their engines and wings stayed the same. Many planes already in the air would be unable to maintain lift. They would begin falling. The first day would not only be a biological crisis, it would be an infrastructure collapse. The atmosphere gets heavier. Earth's atmosphere is held down by gravity. If gravity became much larger, the air would be pulled more tightly toward the surface. The atmosphere would not vanish. It would become more compressed. Surface air pressure would increase because the weight of the air above each square meter would become greater. Breathing might still be possible, but the environment would begin changing immediately. Denser air would alter weather, wind, flight, and heat transfer. Storm systems could become more powerful in some ways because the atmosphere would contain more mass near the surface. Winds would push harder against buildings and trees. Clouds, rain, and pressure systems would adjust to the new gravity. The vertical structure of the atmosphere would shrink because gas would be held closer to the ground. Mountaintops would become more extreme. Air pressure already decreases with altitude, but under stronger gravity, the atmosphere would thin more rapidly as you climbed. High mountain regions could become much harder to survive. At sea level, the air might feel heavy. Higher up, it might disappear too quickly. The sky itself would be reorganized by gravity. The oceans under greater pressure. The oceans would remain on Earth, but they would become more dangerous. Every column of water would weigh more. Pressure would increase with depth faster than before. Deep sea environments, already among the most extreme places on Earth, would become even more crushing. Marine life adapted to current pressures would face enormous stress. Some organisms might survive because deep ocean creatures already live under intense pressure, but the rapid change would be devastating for many species. Sea level itself could shift depending on how the planet compressed and how ocean basins change shape. The stronger gravity would pull water more firmly into low regions, while Earth's crust adjusted under the increased load. Waves would behave differently. Water would fall faster, rain would strike harder, rivers would flow with greater force downhill, increasing erosion in some regions. The tides would also change because Earth's gravity would become stronger. The relationship between Earth, the Moon, and the oceans would be altered. The oceans would not simply get heavier, they would become part of a planetary system trying to rebalance itself. The Moon's orbit changes. The Moon orbits Earth at the speed suited to Earth's current mass. If Earth suddenly became twice as massive, the Moon's existing orbital speed would no longer match the gravity of the planet beneath it. A stronger Earth would pull the Moon inward more powerfully. Unless the Moon somehow gained extra speed at the same moment, its orbit would become much more stretched. It could move into a new elliptical path, swinging closer to Earth before moving outward again. Over long periods, tidal interactions might push the Moon into a different, stable orbit, but the transition could be chaotic and destructive. Satellites would face an even faster crisis. Thousands of spacecraft currently orbit Earth at speeds calculated for Earth's present gravity. If the planet's mass doubled, their orbits would no longer be current. Many would begin to fall into lower paths, burning up in the atmosphere or crashing down. GPS, communication, weather forecasting, and global navigation would begin to fall. Earth's mass is not only important on the ground, it holds the entire orbital environment together. The planet compresses. If the planet suddenly gained mass, the pressure inside would rise dramatically. The added gravity would compress the interior more strongly, increasing stress throughout the mantle and core. The crust would be forced to adjust. Earthquakes would become widespread. Fault lines already under tension could rupture. Mountain ranges could crack and collapse. Volcanoes might become more active as pressure changes disturb magma chambers and mantle movement. The deeper interior would heat and deform as the planet tried to settle into a new equilibrium. This would not be a small adjustment. The Earth's shape, density, and internal pressure are all connected to its mass. Doubling the mass suddenly would be like asking the entire planet to carry a second Earth inside itself. The crust is thin compared to the whole planet. It would not respond gently. Mountains become too heavy. Mountains exist because Earth's crust can support them against gravity. With stronger gravity, mountains become harder to maintain. Their own weight increases, and the rock beneath them experience greater pressure. Over time, the highest mountains would become less stable. Slopes would collapse more easily. Landslides would become more common. Glaciers, if they survive the climate changes, would press harder into valleys and scrape landscapes more aggressively. The maximum possible height of mountains would likely decrease. On a stronger gravity Earth, landscapes would be flatter in the long run. Tall structures, cliffs, and steep formations would be more likely to fail under their own weight. This also affects life. Tall trees would struggle. Their trunks would need to support far more weight, and pumping water upward would become harder. Forests might become shorter, denser, and more ground-hugging over evolutionary time. Animals would change too. Large, long-legged creatures would face greater mechanical stress. Future life, if it survived, might evolve lower bodies, stronger bones, thicker limbs, and slower movement. A heavier Earth would produce heavier biology. Rockets may never leave. Spaceflight would become far more difficult. To reach orbit, a spacecraft must move fast enough sideways that it keeps falling around Earth rather than back to the surface. A more massive Earth requires higher orbital speed. Escape velocity also rises. That means rockets would need far more energy to reach space. The same rocket that can reach orbit today might fail completely on a twice massive Earth. It would need more fuel, stronger engines, and a structure capable of surviving greater stress. But adding more fuel makes the rocket heavier, creating a difficult engineering trap. This is one reason super Earths are fascinating and frightening. A civilization on a much heavier rocky planet might find spaceflight dramatically harder than we did. Humans might look at the stars and understand them scientifically, but struggling to physically reach orbit. If Earth became twice as massive overnight, the space age could almost end instantly. Launch sites would become useless. Existing satellites would fall. Space stations would be lost. The sky would become farther away without moving at all. If Earth had always been twice as massive, life might still have been possible, but it would not look like life today. The planet could have held a thicker atmosphere. Its stronger gravity might have retained more gases over time. Oceans and climate would be shaped differently. Plate tectonics might be more intense or long-lasting because of greater internal heat and pressure. Life would evolve under heavier conditions from the beginning. Animals would likely be shorter and stronger. Flying creatures would face a strange balance. Denser air could help generate lift, but stronger gravity would make bodies harder to lift. Trees might grow slower. Mountains would be smaller. the entire planet would feel more compressed. Intelligent life, if it emerged, would have different bodies and different technology. Buildings would be lower. Transportation would require more energy. Launching into space might be one of the greatest challenges in that civilization's history. A twice massive Earth from birth could be habitable, but suddenly turning our Earth into that world would be catastrophic. If Earth became twice as massive, the disaster would begin with gravity. People would become far heavier. Standing, walking, and breathing would become difficult for many. Buildings, bridges, and aircraft would fail under loads they were never designed to carry. The atmosphere would compress closer to the surface. The oceans would experience greater pressure. Weather systems would reorganize, while mountains, forests, and coastlines began responding to the stronger pull of the planet. The moon's orbit would be disrupted. Satellites would fall or scatter. Spaceflight would become far harder, perhaps ending the modern space age completely. Deep inside Earth, pressure would rise. Earthquakes and volcanoes could become more destructive as the planet compressed and adjusted to its new mass. If Earth had always been twice as massive, life might have evolved to survive it. But if the change happened suddenly, our world would no longer fit the bodies, cities, and systems built under one gravity. Earth would still be recognizable from space for a while. Blue oceans, white clouds, brown continents, a familiar planet, but on the surface, everything would feel wrong. Earth's gravity was never just background. It was the exact weight our world was built to survive.